he's imagining 5, 10, 15, 100 years in the future. What will technology look like at that point? It's not going to be today's, email drafting assistants. It's not going to be coding assistants that we have today. He keeps referencing this idea of superintelligence.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugan. So today on the show, I am talking about Mark Zuckerberg's 6,000-plus word manifesto about the future of AI. After this conversation, my brain hurt a little bit. I'm a little scared and a little excited as well, so you'll want to listen to that conversation. Also, we are speaking with the co-chair of the Democratic Socialists of America. And one of the questions that I have is they're gaining traction and momentum on the local level, but can they actually make waves on the national stage when it comes to the midterm elections? That's ahead as well. Up first, though, who killed Tupac Shakur? That is the question that we have been asking since 1996, when the hip-hop icon was shot in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas. Well, now the man charged in Tupac's killing is set to stand trial. Prosecutors say Duane Keffe D. Davis orchestrated the shooting back in 1996, though he did not actually pull the trigger himself. So will we finally get any answers? I want to bring in NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett on what we can expect from this trial. Hi, Laura.
Hi. So happy to be with you.
It's great to have you. This takes me back, and there's so many things I want to get into on this, because obviously, you and I are both of similar generation and age, and we all remember the time in which there was like a "where is Tupac" question, right? Like there was like conspiracy theories that actually Tupac wasn't even murdered, and in fact he was alive, living on like a beach somewhere.
One of many conspiracy theories.
One of many conspiracy theories, right? But now we're kind of looking down the barrel of this trial, and I think there's a lot of things that we can dig into here. So jury selection starts today in Vegas. Davis was arrested back in 23 and faces one charge of murder with a deadly weapon with intent to promote, further, or assist a criminal gang. He's pled not guilty. Before we get into all the kind of details of this, who is he and why is he now on trial 3 decades after Tupac's murder?
He is on trial because he decided to talk and talk a lot about the shooting of Tupac Shakur. He has placed himself at the center of the shooting. He has placed himself in the car, which rolls up to Tupac's car. He has placed himself as someone who procured the weapon, and he has offered prosecutors a motive for the killing. He is in the thick of this trial from the start.
So let's take folks back a little bit. For those that don't remember, who don't really know what happened, right? Tupac was at the height of his career. This was in 1996. He was selling millions of records worldwide, nominated for Grammys, right? He was in Las Vegas the night that he died. As you mentioned, a car rolls up. Pac is in the car with Suge Knight. What happens then?
We should back up for 1 second. So Davis says that he was trying to help out his nephew. His nephew had been beaten up, and this is actually on surveillance video, by Tupac and some other people earlier in the evening. So Davis says he actually procured the weapon. He doesn't say who he hands it to, but he says on camera, actually, that the shots came from someone in the back of the car. So he's now placed himself with knowledge about the murder weapon and where the shots came from. And then he says, I'm just going to let the streets, the code of the streets, handle the rest. So he doesn't say who actually fires the fatal shot. He doesn't say about what happens next. The problem is that shooting and who actually pulled the trigger, that's not on tape. So prosecutors don't have the benefit of that. They don't also have the benefit of the other people that are in the car with Davis.
Because they're all dead.
Yeah. They're all dead. So all they have is Davis's own words, which are quite damning, and they've made quite a bit out of already.
And the reason why they have all the information that you just laid out is because he wrote about it in a tell-all memoir, which he co-authored, called Compton Street Legends, right?
He not only describes all of that scene that we just talked about in the memoir, he also talked about it with law enforcement. And he talked about it with law enforcement because he was trying to get a better deal about some completely unrelated issue. So he sits down with law enforcement and essentially spills his guts because he was told, in return for spilling his guts, he would get some measure of immunity. Sometimes you hear this referred to as a proffer agreement. Sometimes you hear it referred to as a queen for a day situation where you basically get a free pass. You get to tell prosecutors everything you know in return for some leniency. And he would say that's what he was told. So he spills his guts to law enforcement way back in 2009, tells him everything, and he's been remarkably consistent in that time. But now that we're in 2026, his lawyers are saying, wait a minute, you don't get to use the stuff from way back in 2009 because he thought he was protected. He thought he had immunity. He thought he had the proffer agreement benefit. The problem is he has stayed talking about this case
Right.
for
It wasn't
all
just
of these
then.
many years. So he has basically opened the door to prosecutors to have open season on everything he said, stretching all the way back to 2009 up to today because he hasn't stopped talking.
Is the defense also arguing that he's lying? Or that he was lying?
They have to be careful with this in front of the jury, and it's one of the things I'm going to be watching for as the trial goes on, because they basically have to say that he was engaged at least in some puffery. So I don't know if they're going to outright call him a liar, but they're basically saying he did not tell the truth when he said that he got the gun and he was there and he knows everything about it. They have to say he was just trying to sell books, and so he was sort of inflating the story for some, fictitious dramatization or hyperbole. They're going to have to say something like that, but they're basically
and to show as
it,
if he was like in the know, like he knew he was like riding with those people.
Yeah, and remember, this is the backdrop of a whole bunch of gang violence with the Crips and this other rival gang that Suge Knight was accused of being part of. So they have to sort of say, look, there was a lot of bravado going on, and that's what this really was. This was not a confession to murder.
So what about the potential of these high-profile witnesses possibly taking the stand? And let me give some folks some names here. So Suge Knight, we've seen on the stand before. Sean Diddy Combs, who is currently incarcerated and just went through a very high-profile case himself. Could we see them there?
Yes. Although, of course, they have the right, just like anybody else, should there be anything that could get them in further legal jeopardy, they have the right to plead the fifth on the stand and not answer any questions that could put them in hot water. Suge Knight is an interesting character in all this. Remember, he's the former CEO of Death Row Records. He was sort of a larger-than-life figure. If you put yourself back in the late 90s, like he was like a big person back then. As it relates to Diddy, again, never been charged with anything related to Tupac's death, but certainly a fair amount of chatter around that topic. There have been documentaries made about this topic.
Watched it.
But there's been never any evidence connecting him to Tupac's death.
Is there any speculation that there could be a real revelation as to who actually pulled the trigger here? Laura?
No, and that's why that's part of why this case is so confounding and vexing in so many ways is we still don't know who killed Tupac definitively. There's some reporting out there to suggest that it is this other character, Anderson, who's since dead, who was the nephew of Davis, and so Davis was sort of avenging the fact that his nephew had gotten beaten up, and he didn't want it to seem like his nephew was a punk, so that's why he's avenging his nephew's honor. And that Anderson was the trigger man, but we don't know that, and we'll never be able to test it. And, you can understand why Tupac's family has felt like they're never really gonna get justice here, and they're never really gonna get answers about what happened, especially with the passage of time, right? There's so much evidence that's spoiled. There's so many witnesses that have died, or memories fade, and evidence has just gotten better now. Everything's on camera now. It wasn't back in 1996.
Guys, if you commit a crime, do not write about it in a book. Just
unsolicited
advice. If you commit a crime, do not, and you don't want to be caught or put on trial for it, don't write it in a book. Laura Jarrett, thank you.
Thanks.
So there is a battle for the Democratic Party, and the latest front is in Wisconsin. In the state's primary for governor tomorrow, Democratic Socialist Francesca Hong has been polling far ahead of her opponents. Hong is running on a far-left platform, including creating a public health care option, taxing the rich, and abolishing ICE. But the Democratic establishment is worried that she might turn off voters in the general election. Governor Tony Evers has endorsed Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley. But Hong is just the latest DSA candidate to make waves this primary season. We have also seen DSA members win races in New York City, in Detroit, in Denver, and some of those wins have caught the broader Democratic Party by surprise. So what policies does the DSA actually stand for? And do they have the ability or the desire even to change the direction of the Democratic Party from the inside? For more on this, I want to bring in Democratic Socialists of America National Co-Chair, Megan Romer. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Yasmin. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Why do you think, from your perspective, you are winning in certain races against the Democratic establishment?
Well, people are mad. People are going through it right now. Their wallets are feeling awfully light. Wages are not going up. Cost of everything is going up, and it's hurting. And they're seeing the downstream ramifications of things like President Trump starting endless wars, and they don't see the Democrats fighting back adequately. They see too much capitulation, too much drive for to please a handful of corporate donors that kind of exist on both sides, and not enough actually speaking to working people.
Here's the thing, though. You do have some progressive candidates, for instance, that are putting some distance between themselves and DSA, right? Abdul al-Sayed winning Michigan Senate primary last week. He said he's a capitalist. Will Lawrence won his House primary in Michigan last week. He's a former DSA member. He said he recently chose not to renew his membership. He's focusing on, quote, as he puts it, the issues that are bringing people together. Wisconsin, Francesca Hong has disavowed old statements where she supported kind of abolishing the police and prisons as well as the U.S. Senate. Those policies are all a part of the DSA's platform. So I think there's a question of whether or not the DSA has a PR problem, right? Why are some candidates not willing to stand behind the DSA once they're trying to kind of win over these bigger bases on a federal platform? National platform, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, some of those candidates, Abdul al-Sayed did not apply for DSA membership or endorsement at any point. There are folks who are fellow travelers who we agree with on lots of policies, certainly wish them well. But we are a democratic organization. We make these decisions democratically, what our platform says, who we decide to endorse. It's the running joke, right? Ask 10 socialists their opinion on something, you'll get 12 opinions. We do have a variety of opinions on several things in our organization. Some people aren't going to agree with all of them, and that's totally fine and valid. And we encourage them to keep trying to sell each other on the thing that we think is the important piece to land on. But as far as a PR problem, our platform is it's a long-term plan. It's this plan that's very holistic. A lot of the candidates right now, they're laser focused on cost of living issues, on really like economic bread and butter issues, and that's certainly their prerogative, and I think that's fine. But, we are trying to, we're not laser focused on economic issues just as sort of an empty populist bunch of rhetoric. There is this sort of bigger project that we're working towards.
Are you concerned, though, when you speak about bigger project, retaining power, that 55% of Americans, according to a Washington Post Ipsos poll, said that they would not consider voting for a Democratic Socialist for president?
The number of people who say they won't consider it is going down and down and down every year. It's our job to convince them. It's our job to convince them that they should have this power in their hands, that democracy should be increased, that we should have more access to democracy in our workplaces and our homes.
I want to play a little bit of the interview that you did last month with Fox News. It got some traction, particularly when you answered a sort of rapid fire list of questions about your platform.
Abolish the Senate.
True.
Okay. Replace the presidency and Supreme Court as we now know them.
Yep.
Abolish ICE.
Absolutely.
Abolish borders and give amnesty to anyone currently in the U.S. illegally.
As a long-term plan, yep.
Defund the Pentagon.
Absolutely.
Abolish prisons, at least in large part.
Yeah, again, that as part of a long-term program, yeah.
So here's the thing, Megan, and listen, I get the format that you were doing a rapid fire kind of Q&A. Because one of the critiques was you did not elaborate, explain, or expand on some of your answers aside from, again, part of a long-term program, as you said a couple of different times, right? But these are not necessarily kind of palatable answers to voters that are undecided.
Sure.
Right? to, left of center voters either. You've got to be pretty far left to get on board with some of the answers that you gave. That's just the reality of the country that we live in right now.
Sure.
Right? How do you explain that? And kind of choosing to get on Fox News, answer in the way in which you did, and your objective with some of these issues?
Well, my objective is always to tell the truth, to be clear-eyed about, we have a platform. If I could go on there and lie about it, I could filibuster, I could say, oh, well, actually, we mean this. But you go to our website and it's right there. It's right on there. So I don't see any value in pretending that I believe something different, or any value in sort of trying to filibuster my way around it. I am very happy to talk in expansive detail about any of these things.
But when you have someone who is tuning into Fox News, who is likely voting for President Trump in the camp of Republican voters, the MAGA movement, and these are the types of answers you are giving, like, what is your objective of even appearing there in the first place? Like, do you think that you're going to bring those people over to your side, especially with answers like this, like abolish borders and give amnesty to anyone currently in the U.S. legally, abolish prisons, at least in large part? Like, again, this is just not necessarily a palatable answer to many Americans.
Sure. Fox News is, I'm sorry to say this on NBC News, but is the largest, has the largest viewership and listenership of any of the major media corporations. And a lot of working class people are listening to Fox News, and a lot of working class people are really, really mad about this system that has failed them repeatedly. And I think you see a lot of them making very poor decisions about who to be mad at, and buying a line about who actually did this to them. And I think we're offering an alternative line, and we're like, no, the big corporations did this to you. It wasn't your neighbor who whatever is an immigrant or is queer or whatever. That's not who did this to you. It's some big corporation that's been exploiting you for your labor for your entire adult life.
So let me give you a moment to expand, right? And without this being a 45-minute long conversation. Defund the Pentagon. Okay, so what?
What we see so much military spending on is starting wars, destabilizing countries. We have, I think there are like 800 military bases, U.S. military bases around the world. That doesn't make any sense. And every time we're going through the budget, every time there's always money for more missiles and drones and to build a new military base and to start a new war. And there's never enough money for schools. Oh, we can't have school lunch programs because the kids don't need them. I think budgets are moral documents. And when we prioritize putting more money into war than every other country on earth combined, we are saying exactly who we are and exactly what we want. And I think the people want something different.
Some would argue, though, that defunding the Pentagon would leave us defenseless. I mean, there's still a threat, a global threat out there.
Yeah, the argument is not completely dismantle anything that would leave us, dismantle any sort of protective services. But absolutely to stop just dumping money into destabilizations, into new wars, into new technology that is used to surveil our cities as well as the international community.
But see, therein lies the issue that we talked about earlier, Megan, which is like this potential PR problem, right? Because when you hear defund the Pentagon as a swing voter in the United States, you think this lady wants to leave us without an army, without a military, leave us completely defenseless against any, threats that seek to cause harm to Americans, right? But the way in which you described it is saying that there's some nuance to it. It's not completely dismantling the Pentagon. The president has tried, and other Republicans, by the way, have seized on kind of labeling DSA, Democratic Socialists, as communists, as a strategy to turn off voters. Mayor Mamdani has said explicitly he is not a communist. You're a member of the Red Star Caucus, the DSA's Red Star Caucus, which states on its website its goal is, quote unquote, ultimately to achieve communism. Is that your goal?
So again, my caucus within DSA is one of many caucuses who have a bunch of different sort of ideological persuasions on the left, everything from kind of Nordic social democracy to saying that, yeah, we want a country where workers control the full means of production. Absolutely. Where we come together is under the banner of democratic socialism. We're, again, quite clear about our platform and what we stand for collectively. And so that means that internally we do a lot of practicing on compromising and on finding ways we can work together and move forward and change the country that we've been stuck with.
Well, so now I feel like you're not giving me a straightforward answer, Megan.
Yes, I'm a communist.
You're a communist.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
It's likely that after the midterms, there's going to be several more DSA members joining the House, but they're going to still be a minority within the Democratic caucus. Would you have a problem with them moderating their positions in order to get legislation passed?
I mean, I think that's part of legislating, right? You have to make some kinds of compromises. I think there are areas in which I think that we should not compromise, that we should hold true. You know, I think we should be absolutely rock solid on voting against funding for Israel. I think we should be rock solid against voting on funding for ICE. So some of these things, but yeah, you know, if they have to take a slightly lower percentage of marginal tax rate in order to get a bigger marginal tax rate passed, then great.
Megan Romer, thank you.
Thank you.
And we are back with Here's the Scoop from NBC News. So as the AI race is heating up, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg is laying out his vision for the future. On Monday, he released a whopping 6,500-word essay making the case for quote-unquote personal superintelligence, also known as your own personal AI agent. So for this, I want to bring in Jared Perlow, NBC reporter covering AI for more on what can we learn or glean from Zuckerberg's 6,500-word essay. Did he write it or did AI write it? Do we know?
It looks like he wrote it, or at least some human wrote it, according to my AI text detecting efforts, which aren't foolproof, but it does seem like this is human originated.
Okay. What's the vision?
So the vision here is an open, widely accessible future for AI. So Zuckerberg and Meta have routinely emphasized an open weight or open source approach to AI that differs from approaches from American rivals like Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google. They've historically advocated for a more closed approach where if I'm going to ask an AI system a question, I have to route that question through those companies, their servers, their computers, their hardware. They get to see everything that I'm asking. And then if I'm asking something untowards or potentially something that they deem dangerous, they can shut it down. Zuckerberg says that's not really the way of the future. The best way to make sure that AI goes well for everybody is to distribute it as widely as possible to make sure that everybody can access it. And then everybody can basically compete with each other. And he says that the arc of humanity will bend towards a positive future because you'll have these positive influences outweighing potentially bad actors. In the end, the more people that have access to powerful AI, super intelligent AI, the better.
So this is different than, for instance, when I go on Google and it says, like, do this in AI mode, right?
Right. So we're talking about he's imagining 5, 10, 15, 100 years in the future. What will technology look like at that point? It's not going to be today's, email drafting assistants. It's not going to be coding assistants that we have today. He keeps referencing this idea of superintelligence. So as he says, I'll just quote, he says, superintelligence will be among the most important technologies in history, so its opportunities and challenges will likely be greater than any we've seen in our lifetimes, end quote there. So we're talking about systems that are just more capable than anything we can really comprehend today. Although I'll note, he doesn't explicitly define what superintelligence means, which is kind of this perpetual question in Silicon Valley. Zuckerberg gives some ideas about what it could mean, but even then, he doesn't fully define it. What he says is everybody will have access to an exceptionally capable personal agent that understands you, your goals, and everything you care about. So this is something that will be running in the background of your life 24/7, able to suggest different ideas for businesses.
So like a personal assistant that's literally standing by at every whim, that literally knows everything that's going on inside my brain and my body and what I prefer and all the things.
Exactly, and can predict the different actions that you might want to take, but it gets pretty abstract as well. He emphasizes the potential for these tools to help in idea generation, idea creation. He says that new businesses that we just can't conceive of, people will be able to come up with them. And as a result, he thinks that employment from AI will actually go up because there will be all these new opportunities instead of going down, instead of the regular AI doom and gloom narrative that we sometimes hear out of Silicon Valley. And he also says, people will have access to personalized tutors with above PhD levels of intelligence across different areas. So even when we're talking about super intelligence, he still grounds them in, pretty daily activities. He references how his daughter is helping him build a robot, or that everybody will, be able to come up with personalized medical advances. This is a very different notion of super intelligence than we hear from other people in the Bay, like Anthropic's Dario Amodei, CEO of Anthropic, or OpenAI CEO Sam Altman. They have a different, more expansive vision of superintelligence, it seems like.
Back in 2021, Zuckerberg told us that we would be living in the metaverse within a few years. So when you see that we're not in that metaverse now, how realistic is it, the vision that he is laying out for us in his manifesto, as you call it?
Yeah, the Meta Manifesto, maybe we can term it. I think that's a great question. And if we zoom out a little bit, Meta has historically been a couple of years behind the AI frontier. The Anthropics, the OpenAIs, the Googles of the world, they've really been dominating. So Zuckerberg has been on a media spree. He wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago. So he's really trying to assert that Meta is now back in the game. They've had a whole organizational reshuffle, and they've poached, hundreds of millions of dollars of top-tier talent, and, they're building out hundreds of billions of dollars of data centers. So this is really a play from Zuckerberg to say, no, we're part of the frontier AI discussion here. But as you mentioned, he's made incorrect bets in the past. The metaverse, probably the number one example of that has largely disappeared and is widely viewed as a flop. I would say the difference between the metaverse and this new AI manifesto is with the metaverse, he was kind of alone. With this new approach to superintelligence, he's joining the ranks of the Amadeus, of the Altmans, the Hassabises.
Okay, but some would argue, is Zuckerberg just trying to shore up money? He's basically don't do it their way, do it my way, right? Because we're not doing what they're doing.
I think that's a huge consideration here. I think this is really, in many ways, a business play to differentiate Meta's AI efforts from what's happening in the rest of the Bay. The latter part of the essay also lays out why people shouldn't be afraid of AI risks. To go back, to your earlier point, he also, interestingly, just one more point to add, says that the government should have more insight into how the leading AI companies are developing their systems. They say instead of just going to the government right before they release it onto the market, the government should have insight all along the way of how they train their models. So that's, an interesting contribution to the dialogue there. But I think ultimately it is saying, hey, Meta is doing interesting work on AI. We have a business plan. Our business plan, that's kind of the one that we should follow.
So it all goes down back to money. This conversation was making my head hurt. And then I'm like, oh, it's all about money.
You could say that.
Jared Perlow, thank you.
Thanks so much.
That is going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugin. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever the day may bring. And if you like what you saw and you heard, press the subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.